We're going to be looking at lesson 8.5, which is dealing with what we call the zero product property. Okay, and so what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at now how we take factors and actually solve them in an equation form. Okay, so kind of zooming in here on the first one, zero product property is where we're going to set each factor equal to 0, and then we're going to solve the equations. Okay, so now if we look down here on number 1, okay, on number 1, this one's kind of nice. They're already factored for you, okay? So if I were to kind of back this up a little bit, and the original problem here would have been 3n squared plus 6n equals 0, okay? And so what they've done is they've pulled out their GCF, and then here's what's left over. So they've already done the factoring process for you when you have a set of parentheses, okay? So don't try to go back this way and distribute in or anything like that. They have already pulled out the GCF, and so this is already in factored form, and so we're going to take each factor and set it equal to 0. So what I'm talking about here is we're going to take 3n and set it equal to 0, and n plus 2 and set it equal to 0. Then you're just solving. So when I divide by 3, n equals 0. And then if I subtract the 2 over, n equals negative 2. And you should end up with 2, 3, 4 answers here. It just depends. How I can tell how many answers I'll have is based on the original problem and what the highest exponent is. So in this case, because I have an exponent of 2, that means I'm going to have 2 solutions. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at another one here. Now, on number 2, it is already factored. While I do not agree that these factors are in the lowest terms, obviously we can pull out a 2 here, we can pull out a 3 here. If the book already has set factors for you, do not change them, okay? So go ahead and just set each factor equal to 0. So I'm going to take 2d plus 6 equals 0, and 3d minus 15 equals 0, okay? So now solve each equation. I'm going to subtract 6 off, and then divide by 2. And end up with negative 3. Same thing here. I'm going to add 15 over and then divide and get 5. And those are going to be my 2 solutions. Okay? All right. Now on number 3, what's happened here is now they've given you the original problem, and now you're going to need to go ahead and factor by pulling a GCF. We're going to starting with the baby steps again, so we're kind of going back to the beginning of factoring, and right now all we're going to do is just work on pulling the GCF and then setting both parts equal to 0, and then each lesson we get one step farther into the process. So on this one, we're going to pull out an 8 and a b, and we'll have b minus 5 left over. So I have factored, and now I will set each factor equal to 0. So I have 8b equals 0 and b minus 5 equals 0. Divide by 8, I get 0, add 5, and get 5. So these will both be solutions for this equation. All right, let's try another one here. Number 4. All right, so on number 4, this has to be set equal to 0 before you can do anything, okay? And in fact, we're going to go ahead and kind of write a side note here off to the side. Okay, must be set equal to 0. Okay, this is huge, okay? That's a really important point for right now, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this equal to 0 by adding the 10x over, okay? So I'm going to have x squared plus 10x equals 0. So again, I'm setting equal to 0 first, and now we're going to pull the GCF, and then we're going to set each factor equal to 0. 0 product property. Set each part equal to 0. Now this guy's already done, so that part's good. Let's subtract the 10 off and get x equals negative 10. And those are your 2 solutions, okay? So really, in a way, step 1 is set equal to 0. Step 2, factor, and then step 3, solve. Okay? All right, and also in this lesson, we are also now going to finally start picking up word problems. Okay, and what do those look like and how do we attack those? Okay? So as I read here, the hop of a kangaroo can be modeled by h equals 24t minus 16t squared, where h represents the height of the hop in meters, and t is the time in seconds. Find the values of t when h equals 0. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to take h equals 0 and just going to plug it in right here for this h. Okay, I'm going to kind of zoom in here. So using our equation, we're going to have 0 equals 24t minus 16t squared. Okay, so now you're still pulling a GCF. So it looks like an 8 and a t would come out, and you'll have 3 minus 2t left. Okay, so now set each part equal to 0. And solve. So now t equals 0 on this guy. Okay, we're going to subtract the 3 over. So I have negative 3 equals negative 2t. And then I'm going to divide by negative 2. So I'm going to end up with a positive 3 halves. If you want to call it 1 1/2 or 1.5, that's the same thing. Okay, I don't care how you write that. Now, what I do need to do is we need to start kind of talking about what does all this mean? How does this relate to things that are going to be kind of coming up here soon? And what this is saying is, okay, remember, no matter what, time is on our x-axis. Oh, actually write time correctly here. Time is actually on our x-axis, and in this case, height would be on our y, okay? And so if I'm looking at this first guy where it says t equals 0, that means at 0, the kangaroo is hanging out on the ground. That should make sense. No time has passed, so the height can't have gone anywhere. And then the kangaroo hops, and he lands, and when he lands, it's at 1.5 seconds. So he's been in the air for 1.5 seconds. We don't know anything about how tall he's gotten, how high he jumped. All we know is how long was he in the air for. And we know he was in the air for 1.5 seconds. Okay? So again, when we talked about this, this is telling me how many answers I have. And then my two solutions is where it's crossing the x-axis. So it's crossing at 0 and at 1.5. Two solutions, okay? Now, the question came up in class earlier was, how do we know that it's an arch? Anytime we've got a squared, we're going to have an arch, and we're going to look more at that in the next chapter, okay? All right, and then we have one more question here. It says, what is the height of the kangaroo after 1 second? Okay, so I'm going to take now, I have 1 second right here, and I'm going to be plugging that in for the t's, okay? Since it's asking for the height, we're going to leave h alone. So kind of zoom back in here a little bit. So I'm going to get h equals 24 times 1 minus 16 times 1 squared. So I end up with 24 minus 1 squared is 1 times 16 is 16. So my height would have been 8. And I think it's meters in this case, 8 meters. Okay, so now let's go over to our graph here and kind of take a look at what we're talking about. So I plugged in 1 second, okay? So that means right around, wherever here, estimate 1 second, my height was 8 meters tall. Okay, that's what that is saying. Now we are going to write sentences, and we're kind of going back into that world of word problems, okay? So at 1 second, the kangaroo was 8 meters high. Okay? All right, and that concludes lesson 8.5, zero product property.